Hello, all. This is Dr. Dave Maslock talking about reciprocity.com. The E is spelled with a 3. I'm a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and I'm trying to build a sharing economy proofreading platform where you can get all of the feedback that you desire, as well as the skills and knowledge and wonder required to become a prolific writer and scholar. And in this particular video, I really wanted to talk about, do companies actually run out of ideas? Do people actually experience technological exhaustion over time? Now, this is a really interesting question. I've been thinking about this stuff for a while, and I often hear this insight or this idea that there's technological exhaustion. It comes in different forms, right? So what exactly is technological exhaustion? Well, that could be things like writer's block, for example. You often hear people experiencing writer's block or writers having writer's block. You also hear about, well, the company just didn't become, it's just not innovative anymore. They just die. They don't have anything to do. They've run out of different things, different ideas to pursue. You know, all of these kind of complaints are really, it's a really common complaint that you often hear about. In the odd time, I do see people commenting in academic literature talking about technological exhaustion. So what exactly is technological exhaustion? Well, that is where in a product category or a technological category, whatever you're looking at, the knowledge in that particular category runs out, that there is, people just kind of don't really know anything else to pursue, that the product category just runs out of the, that there just really isn't any knowledge left in that particular category. And that means that there's no ideas being generated, that the firm just simply doesn't know what to do, and they pursue something else when that happens, or die, right? A lot of times that's kind of the excuse that people give, that why a firm died. It just wasn't innovative, for example, or why a writer doesn't write anymore. They just don't have, they had writer's block and they couldn't do that anymore. And now what's interesting here is what this is assuming, and this is the reasons why I actually don't believe that technological exhaustion actually occurs, and that there's actually other reasons behind the scenes that are driving this particular phenomenon to occur, right? Technological exhaustion assumes that knowledge has diminishing returns, that in a product category, there's only a certain amount of fixed knowledge that exists, whatever that is, or in an area, in a space, in a scientific domain, for example, that there's only so much knowledge that exists, and that knowledge just runs out, that there's a fixed amount, and as you continue to pursue in that area, that there's diminishing returns over time, that you just don't, what that means is you're going to spend more and more energy to discover new things in that particular product category, that scientific area, whatever it is you're looking in, that you're just going to not run, you're just going to spend too many resources to continue to persist in that particular area. Well, I actually don't think that is the case. There's a lot of different reasons why. I'm going to give you a couple of them. The first one is simply as an existence proof, that if you look at some firms out there, there's some firms that have done this for a long time. They focus on one product category, one particular thing, and they've been able to produce a substantial amount of stuff, right? So Stephen King is a writer, for example, that has produced a substantial amount of stuff. 3M, so you know the company, right? The Minnesota Mining and Minerals Company, I believe it stands for. So 3M, that they have produced numerous innovations, and they're all just based on glue, on adhesives, right? And they go in all sorts of different areas, and all they're doing is just focusing on glue. They've done that for decades now. They produce things like sandpaper, right? They produce things like Scotch tape. They produce things like Post-it notes. And if you think about all those different things, they produce so many new innovative things. And it's surprising how many innovations that they actually produced just based on adhesives and focusing on adhesives. You'd be surprised on all the things that they produced and how much science actually goes on behind the scenes to get there, and that they've been continuingly pushing the envelope, right? So they're constantly pushing the envelope on the science and pushing the domain of what we understand. It is they've continued to push and they continue to make money every single year. They continue to be very, very profitable for years and years and years. They're a highly successful company focusing on something that's really narrow and that we would consider that they should run out of knowledge, that they should experience technological exhaustion with that mindset. Now, the other thing that this assumes, technological exhaustion assumes on the supply side. So if you think about firms producing stuff, right, or a writer producing something, or whoever it is producing something. So a writer is just basically a company, right? So it's a company of one, or maybe it's a couple. They have a team. Now, with technological exhaustion, that assumes that the knowledge that you have is relatively additive and that you're just simply adding on top of what everybody else is doing, or, that there is some cumulative knowledge that happens, right? But at the same time, it's more of a multiplicative nature, that you are multiplying different elements. And if you think about the different elements of any particular thing in a product domain, in a technological domain, that there's lots of different elements within every single product domain or every single technological domain. There's all sorts of different sort of features that you can look at and interact in many different ways. And as soon as you start adding it up, you just have two elements, right? You look at maybe color, for example, in a product domain. Maybe you're producing a new cell phone, for example. Well, you could just change the color. That's one element. But then if you think about all the different shades of the color, that can actually change a lot. But then you can also change as well as the shape. You could do triangle or rectangle, right? You just simply have those. And if you interact those, right, so you have colors, an infinite number of colors, but then as well as you have infinite number of shapes. Already, just by interacting those two domains, you can really see that multiplying those two together, that you simply have infinite number of different choices and different things that you can pursue. It's really, really large, and you could produce this huge domain of new things, new insights, new ideas by pursuing that different design space, that different technological space, right? So by just doing that simple trick of looking at all of the different elements and simply breaking things into sort of elemental nature, you could really see the possibilities that actually exist. And now if you get into more complicated domains such as, understanding, so for example, understanding fluid flow of a pipe, of some sort of liquid in a pipe, well, then you could break it down into all sorts of different ways to look at that, right? You could look at it from an elemental sense. You can look at the molecular sense. You can look at, the structure of actually the pipe, for example, and how that works. You could also look at sort of fluid flow dynamics. You can look at, there's multiple kinds, right? There's non-Newtonian and Newtonian fluid flow dynamics. This basically means that at the speed of how things are rushing through there, things change differently, or the different structure of the fluid, it'll change differently. But there's so many different elements along the way that you can decompose and break things up. And, just simply as you start investigating one particular domain and start looking at that particular domain, it becomes infinite, right? It's just a really big thing to look into. When you start realizing that knowledge and elements of knowledge is really, truly multiplicative, that they're building on top of each other, the stuff that you've learned before really does add on and add and multiply what your possibilities are in the future. So from the supply side, that's a really difficult argument to make, that technological exhaustion exists, because there's so many different ways that you can interact things. Now, from the demand side of any particular firm or any particular writer, whatever you're looking at, maybe a PhD student, whatever it is you're looking at, there is so many unmet needs, right? So even just one firm or one company is just they're going to have many different audiences, that they're going to be consumers, there's different stakeholders, right? So if you're producing some sort of book, for example, there's different kinds of people that are going to be reading that book, or different, all sorts of different really interesting people that are interested reading that. And they're going to have different perspectives, right? Simply based on this idea that they themselves have their own knowledge, which means they're going to provide all these different unmet needs. They might communicate to you and talk to you, all these different unmet needs that you never thought about. So the list, and in fact, if you look at sort of bug lists of computer programs or software programs, for example, the list is infinite, right? The lists are huge and they never really deplete over time because people are using things in different ways and they're trying things out in different ways, and it just becomes overwhelming. You get this huge list of bugs that you would never have guessed when you created whatever it is you're making, right? So it becomes very large, and those unmet needs, those bugs, those unmet needs provide all sorts of opportunities for a firm or for a writer to pursue and to tackle it. So what exactly is leading to technological exhaustion? What happens with technological exhaustion? What is that? What makes a firm become less innovative? Well, I think there's a lot of different reasons that cause firms to become less innovative beyond, the simple things that they just ran out of ideas, right? So there's a lot of different things like depletion of human will. So there's a lot of behavioral stuff that goes on with creating something, and you got to create it for a long time. Creating something for a long time is really hard and really difficult to do, and most people don't have that behavioral will to stick with it. I mean, just look at the people around you in terms of the population, in terms of their, the diet that they eat, in terms of getting the right amount of exercise, getting the right amount of sleep. You'll find out most people actually are really terrible at that. In aggregate, they're really bad. And most people don't have sort of behavioral will to stick with something or something like that, right? So you have to look at that particular issue. That's a really important big one that is difficult to address, right? So there's other things that happen as well, as like politics, for example, right? Why if a firm just kind of falls apart, maybe that there's some weird political stuff that's happening within the company that can't be explained. Maybe they have, multiple team members that are fighting with each other and they can't get ideas through. And it just slowly, they deplete the number of ideas that actually can get through to the end, that they kind of lack the political will to continue to push things out. And that's a really big one as well. Now, there's also other things which is kind of symptomatic more than anything of major issues like that, such as turnover, employee turnover. There's too many people coming in and too many people going out, and they can't sustain and generate new ideas too much. Now, it's good to have some turnover within the firm, bringing in new ideas that come in from younger folks or older folks that haven't been in that area. But you don't want too much turnover because that just creates sort of unrest within the company. Now, there's other, sort of macro things that happen as well that, for example, the typewriter is no longer all that valued at this moment. So producing a typewriter doesn't exactly make all that much sense. However, if you were a smart firm, you could take a step back and say, well, all of the basic principles that were used in typewriters can be used in developing keyboards for a computer. And then from there, you have this sort of basic keyboard. You can say that, well, maybe all the basic ideas there, we can create different sensors that allow us to create maybe a touchpad or something like that. So you could, in theory, sort of navigate these external changes, these external events, technological discontinuities that happen in the environment, if you're taking a step back and extracting and sort of looking at the knowledge that is being developed and really sort of emphasizing the different elemental parts of the knowledge that actually happens and being able to generate trends from that. Now, that's a really difficult thing to do because people are producing money, and once they actually eventually produce money in a firm, then they want to extract some value from that. But it's really, and then once you're extracting value, it's difficult to sort of get the political will to say, I want to reinvest it in to create more research and development so we can actually extract and sort of push things forward, extract knowledge and push things forward into another technological area. And you'll find out it's really difficult for a lot of firms to do. They can sustain it for a while. Most firms can't sustain that for a long time. If they can sustain it for a long time, then they'll probably become very successful. It's a really difficult thing to do. So with that, technological exhaustion, I'm really not a proponent. I'm not I might sort of talk about that in the sense that, describing what's happening with a particular phenomenon, but I also don't think that technological exhaustion is quite possible in the sense that, the ideas are getting depleted in an area that that might run out or something like that. The sort of general knowledge or general idea that companies and writers, whoever scientists run out of ideas over time. I don't think that's quite possible because of these different factors that happen in knowledge and how we think about knowledge and ideas. So if you like this idea, make sure that you do watch every Thursday, try to put out stuff that's related to innovation, technology, and what I find interesting, generally interesting. You can also watch my Saturday stuff. It's all about strategy strategy for startups and small businesses, as well as you can look at other videos I put out in terms of my describing the journey to create this reciprocity platform, where I'm trying to create something that not only produces, good, produces something that's good, but as well make sure that other people, that I can give it back as much as I possibly can, as well as just be fun, to have some sort of outlet to make sure that ideas get out there and that we can talk about these really interesting things. So thank you so much. I do appreciate all of your time. Take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.